Welcome to Trough 12. Holidays is coming up. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, which means we're going to be gathering with family and friends. But also, there are those that unfortunately can't do that due to the pandemic. Oh my gosh, we're still living in a pandemic. With that pandemic, there are people still isolating themselves, deciding to quarantine or not be involved in large groups. So that takes a large toll actually in mental health. It might be really taboo in one ethnicity group or very accepting in another. So this is my ethnic news for this video. Is going to be talking about the mental illnesses in different ethnicity groups. Let's first address what is mental illness. So according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, mental illnesses is characterized by changes in mood, behavior, or thinking, anything that results in impaired functioning. The most common mental health disorder is depression, and it is estimated that it will be the second leading cause of disability in the world by 2020. Very common for people to view mental health as a personal matter within an individual. But according to Sophia Adrad, a writer for the Public Health Advocate in Community Health, she states that mental illness and mental health in general are affected by the combination of biological, genetic factors, psychology, and society. The biggest influence is the societal factors, and they often go ignored. So an interesting aspect of society is its diversity in cultures and backgrounds that affect an individual's mental health related experiences. Another source, according to the report Mental Health, Cultural Race, and Ethnicity, there are many ways in which culture showed its influence on a diversity of experiences. For instance, culture affects the way in which people describe their symptoms, such as whether they choose to describe emotional or physical symptoms. Essentially, it dictates whether people selectively present symptoms in a culturally appropriate way that won't reflect badly on them. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, culture is important because it bears upon what all people bring to the clinical setting. It can account for minor variations in how people communicate their symptoms and which ones they report. More often, culture bears on whether people even seek help in the first place, what types of help they seek, what types of coping styles and social supports they have, and how much stigma they attach to mental illness. So having mentioned that cultural and social factors have the most direct role in most mental illnesses, one example would be PTSD. PTSD is caused from traumatic experiences. It is most common in U.S. combat veterans, inner city residents, and immigrants from countries coming from turmoil. That includes a lot of Asian Americans, a lot of Hispanic Americans. They reveal alarming rates of PTSD in communities due to the pre-immigration exposure to trauma. Within the social aspect of mental illnesses include family factors. So family factors can either protect against or contribute to the risking of developing a mental illness. For example, supportive families and good sibling relationships can protect against the onset of mental illness. On the other hand, a family environment marked by severe marital discord, overcrowding, and social disadvantage can contribute to the onset of mental illness. Conditions such as child abuse, neglectment, and sexual abuse also place children at risk for mental disorders and suicides. Many ethnicity groups handle their mental disorders differently. For African Americans and people of color, they handle their personal problems and distresses on their own. In comparison to people that are white, they turn to rely on their spirituality for support. Similar to the African Americans, the Asians are more likely to report their somatic symptoms, for example, having dizziness, and they don't ever explain or report their emotional symptoms. Reason being why these ethnic groups tend to not seek for help is due to that mental health experience for minorities have been greatly affected by culture and how society at large views that culture. Racial and ethnic minorities in the U.S. are less likely than white people to seek mental health, or they delay treatment until symptoms become very severe. Moving on to the topic of coping styles, we're in a world full of different people, so of course there'll be different coping styles. There's a study between children from Thailand versus America. Thailand is a country very largely based on the Buddhist religion. The Buddhist religion encourages self-control and emotional restraint. The Thai children were 2 times more likely than American children to not talk back, in comparison to the American children who cope to having to scream or running away. Reason being why, or I think that mental illness in my household isn't something talked about much is because the generation before have handled something that the generations after wouldn't be able to handle. I don't know if that makes sense, but I have parents. They grew up in the Philippines. So my dad went to school, and paying for school wasn't easy for him. He worked in farms and he did his schoolwork and he made it happen. I look up to him very much. And I know for sure it's something that if I were to be in his shoes, with my upbringing and my mindset now, I don't think I would have had that mental toughness that he had. And so my mom's mom, she grew up, or she started off having 9 siblings, and then come around World War II, it was a war against the Spaniards that came to our province in the Philippines. It boiled down to 3 siblings left, including herself. So 6 of her siblings passed away because they had to live in the woods just to avoid the Spaniards who were raiding our hometown. Just to put myself in her shoes, imagining having to lose 6 siblings, definitely I would think that her and her family had severe mental illness or just so many things going on in their head. Having that mindset, knowing that my family is strong mentally, because myself and my brother and all my cousins and my generation are here. We're here in America and we're able to go to school and work and experience the things that we're experiencing without the struggles of any war or having to work our butt offs in rice fields. It's just something I'm very grateful for. Most definitely, I think my grandparents and my parents had mental illnesses, and it just blows my mind how they were able to go through that. But they did, and the fact that they did reminds me that I'll be in a great place. So I feel as if a lot of my colleagues, people around my age, more specifically live in America, or even those that live in first world countries, we're able to live a very privileged life due to the sacrifices our parents and our parents' made, and that came with the cost of dealing with mental disorders. I think at their times that mental disorders were very taboo. I know that's very prevalent in the Asian minority. Mental illness is just expected to be brushed off. There are circumstances that I will come across that will take a lot of mental toughness, but definitely not to the same extent that my parents and my parents' had to go through. So I think that it's a responsibility for me to break the cycle that mental illness is not something real, instead of trying to treat it at the time it happens. I want to build a household, I want to build a family that will prevent mental illness. We have the responsibility of growing families and growing households that don't have a lot of abuse, no violence, lots of understanding and open conversations. So I would like to end this video with a question. How does your family, or from your experiences, how is mental health addressed? How is it coped within your household and your community? If it happens to you, how do you cope with it? If you have family members with it, if you have family members that do, how do they cope with it? What are effective ways to prevent such things, prevent individuals into eventually developing mental illnesses? What may be the factors that lead to mental illness? you know, maybe in the school life, in the work field, at home. How would you prefer for mental health and mental well-being to be promoted? Okay, so that's it for my trough. Hope you guys are doing great the rest of the semester.